Hello, Wild Philosophy here. So today I am going to talk about George MacDonald's The Princess and the Goblin. Now, unlike our last book, this one is actually about a princess, the young daughter of a king, who is targeted by the goblins who live under the kingdom for kidnapping because they want to revenge themselves on the ancestors of the king for some distant plight. And she is saved both through the actions of the ghost of her great-great-grandmother, I believe, and also through the actions of a young miner's boy by the name of Curdy. It's a small kingdom, so the difference between Curdy and the princess isn't quite as great as it would say between me and one of the princesses of the Queen of England, or one of the daughters of the Queen of England, or granddaughters, as is more probable. This one I actually don't need to spoil too much. We cover everything I've just said, I think, within the first chapter or two of the book. The only information I need to talk about is how George MacDonald views a prince. Now, George MacDonald was a Calvinist Universalist. In fact, I believe he was the only Calvinist Universalist, which, for those who are unaware, Calvinists believe that an all-good God has predestined some of us for heaven and others for hell from birth, so your salvation is not determined by your personal faith as it is in Catholicism or other forms of Protestantism. There's two different doctrines operating in the background here, the doctrine of election and the doctrine of, just a second, limited atonement, namely that God chooses some, but he does not choose all. Now, George MacDonald, growing up, thought that this was aberrant, but rather than reject the doctrine of election, what he seems to have done, although I haven't read many of his theological works, so do not quote me on this to anyone, is instead then involved the doctrine of universal atonement, but also adopted universal salvation. So MacDonald believed that those who died without being chosen by God would eventually be chosen. We see this doctrine most explicitly in his book Lilith, which is quite literally about the salvation of the demon Lilith, one of the oldest demons in mythology, and a text that comes very close to heresy for many other Christians' sects, or at least their sects, S-E-C-T-S, not the other one. This manifests itself again in the book, primarily through his view that princedom can almost be achieved by anyone, or rather that God can elect anyone to princedom, not just actual princes. And so Curdy again behaves according to the virtues of princedom, which is courage, chivalry, and honor. He risks his life numerous times to rescue the princess, cares very little for his own safety, and I'm trying to remember if he gets in a sword fight at the end, or if others do, or if he just uses a cudgel. He's a young boy, it's a children's book, so they're not adults. But even if he doesn't, I know he does whack people with a club. And The Princess and the Goblin probably does a better job at showing this than a little princess does, because Burnett has those two ideas playing in the background, whereas MacDonald has only the one, and that one is the doctrine of what we might call democratic aristocracy, where whoever so chooses might become an aristocrat. And I'm wondering now if he didn't reject the doctrine of election too. I probably should have looked into that before I did this video, but too late. As the case may be, there's probably somebody who's read his theological works who's going to be beating me to death, but be that as it may, be that as it may. The novel itself is an excellent metaphor also for those who do not choose to follow the noble life, because the goblins were once men, but they chose to sink beneath the earth, and they're descended into total depravity, from which they are incapable of escaping. And they keep sinking lower and lower, an illustration of the Chestertonian doctrine that though one can stay at one level of good, it is very difficult to stay at one level of evil. And that's all I have to say. This was a short video, hoping to do some more philosophical ones soon, but we'll have to see. I might frolic some more amongst children's novels. Have a good day, and may honor attend you.